2025 is going to be the best year that you've ever had. And we're going to help make that happen. We got 2 summits heading your way. First of all, in January, the Sales and Business Development Recruiting Summit. Make sure to get registered, free for the live sessions, or go VIP for the replays. And then the Recruiting Growth Summit is coming back for March. These events are going to help you start strong, run strong, so that way you can finish strong. So let's go. Make sure to get registered. You'll see the link in the show notes. All right, enjoy the podcast. Coming up on this episode of the Elite Recruiter Podcast.
I was 100% committed, mainly because I had just come off the worst failure of my life, right? So I was in a place where it was embarrassing. I lived my worst case scenario. Everyone thought I was crazy moving to Panama. They said it was a really bad idea and that things were going to blow up in my face. And I was like, oh no, that's not going to happen. And then it did happen.
Welcome to the Elite Recruiter Podcast with your host, Benjamin Mena, where we focus on what it takes to win in the recruiting game. We cover it all from sales, marketing, mindset, money, leadership, and placements.
I'm so excited about this episode of the Elite Recruiter Podcast because I remember sitting in my recruiting chair almost 2 decades ago, trying to figure out this recruiting game because I wanted to win so bad. We're going to talk about in this episode how you can become that elite recruiter sitting in an agency. And here's the cool thing about being at an agency. You don't have to worry about some of the stresses of being a business owner. You can go back to just crushing it. But the question is how do you crush it? And on top of that, how do you build the respect for yourself as a recruiting professional? Because I think that's one of the secrets that I think many younger recruiters just have not understood it yet. But we're here to talk about it. And I got Grace Marlin in here to kind of share these secrets because she's actually been working with so many agency recruiters that she understands what is helping them win, what's keeping them from winning, and really what separates you so that way you can crush it as an agency recruiter. So welcome to the podcast, Grace.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
So real quick, before we start doing a deep dive on how you ended up in this wonderful space, can you share with the listeners a little bit about what you're doing right now?
Yeah, so I've been working in recruitment for the past 6.5 years, almost exactly. And I started out recruiting recruiters. So it was an interesting field to go into, an interesting market to go into when this was my first recruitment role myself. So I had to convince other people in the industry that I knew what I was talking about, even when I didn't know what I was talking about. I didn't necessarily realize it was going into trial by fire. But once I started to get the hang of it, which for me, I think it took probably my first 6 to 12 months to really feel like I knew what I was doing. And once I had gotten to that level, I started to be able to realize how much opportunity there was in this industry. And I became very, very passionate about what I'm doing. At this point now, a half owner of my business, I'm really excited to always focus on the agency recruitment space and to introduce other people to this space and also help them elevate their careers, specifically on the agency side.
You know what's wild is I think maybe it was my first 5 years or more in the recruiting space. I did not know that there's recruiters for recruiters.
Yeah. There still are a lot of people that I come across who don't realize that we exist too. And honestly, when we first came into the industry in 2018, there weren't that many agencies doing what we're doing. Honestly, there was a very small handful of people. So it still, I think, is a pretty young market. Since we've been in the market for, going on 7 years next year, a lot more agencies have come into this space and we have, gained a lot more competitors. But compared to a lot of other markets, I think there's still not that many people who are aware of what we do. And then there's also differences too, because we only work agency to agency. A lot of people who might cover what we do will also cover internal recruiters or corporate and operational roles, but we are only specifically headhunter for headhunters and staffing salespeople. So we only represent producers. We only represent agencies. We don't do any HR roles. We don't do any internal recruiting roles. So we are very specifically just on the agency side. So that's kind of this very, very hyper niche that we focused and carved out for ourselves. And so I think our business is a little bit different than some of the other agencies who are covering what they do that might work a little bit more broadly.
Well, we'll start diving into some of the stories and some of the things that you've figured out over time, but how did you even end up in this wonderful world of recruiting?
Honestly, it is a very long story. And I think similar to pretty much everybody in the industry, I fell into it. I don't think anybody really intentionally comes into the industry and is I want to be a recruiter. It's usually something that you kind of stumble into and just happenstance, things work out. When I first got out of college, I worked in consulting. So I did healthcare finance consulting for 4.5 years. Although I was good at it and I got promoted multiple times, I realized a couple things about myself that were very critical. I am not a super corporate person. And that was something that I had issues with constantly because I was a top producer. And it irritated me to no end because I was consistently a top performer and we were tracked on KPIs and metrics just like anybody in the recruiting industry would be tracked on. So I was a revenue generator, but I was not paid any type of commission. And that's something that irritated me to no end because no matter how much I was overperforming compared to my peers, and that was all stuff that was literally being tracked, similar to how we're being tracked in recruiting, I never felt adequately compensated. I always felt like it was unfair that I was getting paid the same amount as other people, despite the fact that I was overperforming for them. So what I didn't realize at that time, similar to a lot of people who have kind of a negative connotation when it comes to being in a sales role, I was very anti-sales roles because I just didn't think that they were very I didn't go to school, put myself through college in order to get into sales. But ultimately, that's the only type of role that will actually make me feel satisfied because there is that direct correlation between my inputs and outputs. And I realized that that was really important to me. So I ended up moving outside of the country. It's kind of a long story. I moved for a relationship and I was already ready for something different in my life. So I kind of blew up my life intentionally. I quit my job in consulting. I sold everything I owned, put my life into 2 suitcases, and I moved to Central America. So I moved to Panama. I lived there for 6 months. I didn't really speak Spanish when I moved there. It's this country where 5% of the population speaks English. So it was a survival skill for me to learn Spanish. So in the time that I was there, when I moved, I immigrated and I was like, I'm leaving the US. I'm not going to live here anymore. That being said, the relationship blew up. It was kind of a mess. I came back to the US and, moved back in with my parents. I was 26 years old and I felt like a total failure. But what I knew is I didn't want to go back into consulting, but I had a chance to kind of figure out what I wanted to do with my career. So I was working in nightlife. I was doing bottle service. I was bartending, trying to figure out what I wanted to do next in my career. And I was at the gym one day and working out, and I listened to a podcast that my now business partner, Don was interviewed on. So podcasts are really special to me. I love podcasts. I met Don through a podcast. Her interview really resonated with me because I was kind of a lost soul at that point in my life. And I was like, I need somebody like her. I wanted to just attach myself to her like a barnacle because she just seemed like she knew what she was doing. And I did not know what I was doing. So she had talked a lot about wealth creation and all the possibilities that come from a career in agency recruitment, and her story is really compelling. I'm sure anybody who knows about me most likely knows about her too. So I know that she was also interviewed on your podcast, and I was just like, this is somebody I need in my life. So I ended up reaching out to her and said, I don't completely understand what you do in your business, but your interview really resonated with me. I listened to it back to back twice, and I just felt really compelled to reach out to you. I've never done that to anyone else. But I would love to see if there's a possibility that we could work together, because she had kind of just started the company that I now work in. It was only 2 or 3 months old. So we ended up getting connected, talked a few different times. She had me meet different people on the team and was like, okay, I would love for you to come work for me. What I didn't realize at the time, which is fine, but she gave me honestly a horrible deal. And it was fine. She gave me 0 base, 100% commission. And the commission rate was kind of low, but I didn't really care because I was like, I just need to learn this business. And so I continued working in nightlife because I wasn't making any money for 6 or 7 months when I was working really hard. And my parents thought I was crazy. They're like, you're really you're working 12-hour days and you're making no money. Is this lady scamming you? What is going on? And it was just I had kind of a rough start in the industry, like a lot of people did. My first couple deals fell apart. So it was really trial by fire. And throughout the time, learning the business, I started to see all the opportunity, and Don was so gracious to teach me the business. I ended up moving to the East Coast because I was in California at that time. Her and all the rest of the team were on the East Coast. So I moved to the East Coast specifically to focus on recruitment and dedicate my life to it. And thankfully I did that because now, I have my own company with her. We are now business partners, which is great. So that's kind of the journey that I've experienced in the industry. So I've really lived everything I talk to my candidates about, I've lived horrible ruts, losing my mojo, getting it back. Like I've been there over and over and over again. And because of that, like I understand the full complexity of how careers can develop in the industry. And that's the reason why I'm able to now focus on helping top producers maximize their careers.
Okay, so the consulting role, it almost sounded like you were dealing with the curse of the competence.
Mm.
Like where everything was being placed on you. And then you're looking around like, why are you gauging me like 5 times harder when they're not doing shit?
Well, yes and no. So like, I actually liked it. I had an amazing manager. So I will give my manager a lot of credit for that. She's the reason why I stayed for 4.5 years, because I knew a couple years in I didn't really want to be there anymore. But she was like, she knew how to focus on trying to motivate me. She knew I was really money motivated. So she would probably go out of her own pocket, I think, to like give me gift cards for producing. And she would like write me a card. She's literally like hiding it in my desk. And she's like, don't let anyone else know that I gave you this. Cause like she understood that I needed that. And she would recognize me in that way. So she was incredible. And she told me, she was like, I know you like having the hardest projects. So I give you hard, messy, complicated projects because it's interest. Like you like that challenge. So I actually enjoyed it. I just wanted to be paid better. I wanted to be paid more than my peers because I'm like, if I don't mind, I actually enjoy the work. I think it's kind of boring to have easy projects. So like, give me the messes. I like that. But also pay me more. But the reality of how they structured their comp structure is they had everyone who started at the same time would be on the same salary band. It was kind of stuck with the exact position. There was no potential to earn more money regardless of how much you were producing. So I'm like, it's a great business model from the business's end, but for me, it was not a great from the worker's side.
So your entire life changed from a podcast interview.
Yep.
Like for somebody listening to this podcast, like you said you've never reached out to anybody before that, right?
And actually since, I don't think I really have either. No, I mean, no, it wasn't like a common practice that I had to email somebody based off a podcast interview, but truly podcast interview changed my life completely.
Which I find is just phenomenal. Like you never know the thin string that can completely change our career, change somebody's life. Like talk about the crazy impact. And fast forward, like, you started working 6-7 months in before you made your first placement, 0% like base, all commission.
Yeah.
Why did you not quit those 6 or 7 months in?
Well, a couple different things. First of all, Don threw me some bones. Like she could see how hard I was working and she helped me with like some deal splits. And it wasn't that she didn't want to pay me. It was just that my deals weren't working. But the reason why I kept going was because I could tell, I knew that it was just like I needed to put the pieces together. There were a couple things that I was missing, but I knew I was close. I just needed to figure it out. So kind of going into some of the different topics, I think that we're probably going to talk about, segueing a little bit into some of the topics we're going to talk about. One of the things that I struggled with earlier in my recruiting career was really being able to figure out what a quality candidate looked like and who was worth my time and who was worth, digging into deeper versus who was most likely going to not work out. So because we were a small agency and, we were kind of just getting started, like I had the benefit of not having the same amount of metrics that a lot of people have to adhere to earlier in their career. Like I was taught by an expert headhunter about how to actually run a very high quality recruiting desk. But part of that I've gained as like a competence level was really understanding who's worth my time and who isn't, being prudent about where I'm spending my time. Because what I ended up doing is I would feel bad for people that maybe were not really cut out for the industry and like spend way too much time coaching them and like getting to know them. And I was kind of like friends with people more than running my desk as a business. So because of that, I was kind of spinning my wheels on a lot of these candidates. And that was something that I had to learn how to be more discerning about and also how to focus kind of like on the 80-20 rules. Like who are the 20% of people that if I build my recruitment desk off of them, that they will be the people who will help me do more deals. And then also, how can I be more efficient? How can I find the inefficiencies in my desk and also have a keener eye for quality so that I'm not working 12 hours a day with very little to show for it? So those are all things that I need to go through. And honestly, everyone learns a little bit differently. Unfortunately, I am the person who kind of needs to learn by my mistakes. It's really hard for me to just like see other people do it. I'm like, I think I'm going to be better. I think I'm going to be different. And then I find out I'm not. So I had to go through that myself. And unfortunately, my path was just like a bit longer. But because of that, I feel very confident that I have earned my place, because it was really hard for a long time. And I was having to work 2 jobs. I barely was making any money. I think literally my first year I made $12,000, like literally $12,000 on my tax return, which was like the lowest earning year I think I've ever had since I was like 14 or 15 years old. And it forced me to A, make sure I was really committed to this industry, but then B, like I knew I was building my network and planting seeds, and it was just a matter of time until it came back around. So I had to just exercise patience and be consistent and just keep it going. So that's the reason why I stayed committed, was because I knew it had potential. I could see it. I just needed to become better, increase my skill set, and then also, be patient, because it takes time to do deals. And, especially building out like a really high quality network, it just takes time for things to come back around.
So a combination of the lessons that you've learned and the combination of like all the people that you've been speaking with since we're looking at 7 years in, you've probably had a conversation with, I'm guessing, about 50,000 recruiters at least.
Probably, yeah.
What are you seeing that separates the recruiters that are crushing it versus the recruiters that are just average versus the recruiters that are struggling?
Yeah. Kind of going back to like what helped me to become a better recruiter is like I had to really start viewing my recruitment desk as running a business and having a very like commercial instinct about things. So whether that was, making sure that clients were being engaged in the process and that they were helping me be effective at my job and being able to have tough conversations with them, so I wasn't spinning my wheels on stuff, or they weren't, giving me the runaround. That was one skill set that I had to improve on. And when I didn't do that as much, and the same with candidates too, is like, making sure that people aren't lying to you, making sure that you really are getting to the meat and potatoes. Like people can say, I'm open to this, or I'm open to that, or, I'm comfortable or flexible with salary, or I'm open to relocating. And you have to really hone in, like, is that actually true? Or is that just something that they're kind of figuring out? So instead of putting somebody in process if they're wishy-washy about something, I would rather spend more time with them, qualifying them, and really like having a consultative conversation with them just to lay out options. So that way, if I'm putting somebody in process, they're very committed. I'm not finding out surprises in the middle that I should have just spent more time on, to uncover. So those are all things like being thorough and being process oriented and making sure that you're only representing high quality clients and candidates. That helps you to build a quality recruitment desk. But beyond that, like you're also going to have to turn a lot of people down. And there's a lot of people that you're not going to be able to work with, even if they're amazing people, even if they're kind people. They're just not people that clients are willing to pay you a fee for. So being very clear on like, what is a fee-worthy candidate? What is an actually desirable job? Are clients in line with the market in terms of what they're expecting to get for the money that they're willing to pay? Like being able to guide those conversations and have them in a very forthright way. That's like, if their expectations are out of line with reality, whatever in that is, our job as headhunters is to make sure that we are very clear before we go into process with a person as to whether or not, there's any like glaring potential deal killer or red flag. So the more that I started looking at my desk as like running a business and being very commercial, okay, is this something that's viable? Is this something that's worth my time? Is this somebody that most likely has a very high odds of closing? I started focusing on exclusivity with the candidates because my market's like almost 100% candidate driven. So if I can lock my candidates down on exclusivity and present, 4 options to them, have them in multiple interview processes, my odds of placing that person are very high. Versus like if I'm representing a candidate who is working with 3 other recruiters, they may be interviewing in places that they're not being honest with me about. Like there's something that's just going on that I can like throw my hat in the ring and maybe get somewhere, or would I just rather pass on that person and try to find somebody that I can then get on exclusivity, be able to actually manage their process completely and give myself very high odds of placing them. Right. So I started looking at the value of my time in a very like clear cut way. And that has helped me to be a lot more effective. I noticed the same thing with the headhunters that I work with. People, once people get past like 2 years in, that's usually the first 2 years, they're kind of figuring things out. Gives you time to see the different variations in the market. Like obviously the past 4 years since COVID, the market has been on an extremely wild roller coaster, and the pendulum has swung very far in both directions. So for your first year or two, like you're just trying to figure things out and get your feet under you. But once you have really like established your baseline of understanding about the market and viewing yourself as a professional who actually has insight and can guide conversations and feel competent in being put into those different scenarios that could be a little bit tricky, but you know that you can handle them. That's what I think if you start focusing on like you're making sure that you're getting ROI for your time, that's what helps people to usually work less, but make more. And I think that's most people's goal in the industry. Yes, you have to put in the hours, but if you can work 20 hours a week and still bill $1 million a year, that's amazing. I love that for people. But the only people who do that are people who are like laser focused on, is this a deal or is this not a deal? And they don't waste their time on taking too many outside shots on things that may not end up actually working out.
I think you nailed the laser focus, like 20 hours a week. Like I'm sure you've seen this in your career across time, but you see somebody working 50 hours, but
yep.
Would they only do like 10 hours of actual work?
Honestly, sometimes people are doing 50 hours of actual work because they're just like trying to help everyone and be everything for everybody because they're not valuing their own time as a professional. Clients are sending them on wild goose chases and they're allowing clients to do that. They're not, saying, no, I'm not going to work on that. Or no, you're like $50,000 below market and you want someone in the office 5 days a week. Like that is not something I can fill. And if I happen to be able to fill it, amazing. But like you have to retain me if you really want me to fill that, or being able to focus on things that are actually like going to help them make money. Because otherwise people just start getting burnt out. Like they're just trying to help everyone and like, take on a lot of charity cases, but they're not actually, doing deals. And that's frustrating for people.
Oh, I love that. Charity cases. Oh, I'm saving that one.
I mean, because if you want to do that, you can do that. But that's also not the way that you're going to make a lot of money in recruiting.
But I think that's a problem that a lot of new recruiters face is like when they get into the industry, it's like, hey, like I'm helping somebody get a job. Like, no, you're helping a company fill a position. Like,
yeah.
When did that mental switch actually happen for you?
I think it happened when I wasn't making money. I was exhausted because I was working so hard and I was making no money. So it's like at a certain point, I had to start being like, okay, I got to fix something. Because I want to make a lot of money. So like I said, I'm a person who learns, unfortunately, by my mistakes. And it took me getting burned over and over and over and over and over again to then be like, okay, like something needs to give. Like I can't try to like spend 30 hours on something that's going to go nowhere for me. So it took me just getting fed up, honestly, to start focusing on that. And then it was a lot easier for me to start saying no. And I had to become comfortable with like being the bad guy, Nobody wants to turn somebody down, especially if it's somebody who's like a really nice person, but they're just not somebody that you can represent or not somebody that is going to be seen as a fee-worthy candidate.
This is going to sound like a completely stupid question, so just be prepared for that. I feel like I can in the industries that I work in, I can easily tear that apart and figure that out. But I feel like that would be harder to figure out when you're talking to recruiters.
Yeah, it is, especially because some people aren't really honest. There's a lot of, unfortunately, there's some very big characters and big personality types in this industry. And sometimes people can like over exaggerate their results or kind of lie about things. So it took a long time to be able to build, I think, my like mental intuition, like recruiter intuition about like, is this somebody I can trust? Is this somebody who is actually, going to be a partner with me in this process? Are they buying into my service, or are they just kind of like telling me what I want to hear so that I will then take them on and hopefully they get something out of me? So it took a while to be able to figure that out, especially because it is a very complicated industry, like how comp structures are set up. Obviously I'm selling somebody on, taking a lower guaranteed comp structure than what they're on right now. Like most people, if you're making $150K in recruiting, usually you're on like a $70K base maybe, and you're making most of your money on commission. When I'm placing people, I'm not going to get them $150K guarantee. Like that's just unfortunately not how it works in this industry. So I'm having to sell people and walking away from something that's guaranteed for them because it's like the current agency that they're at to go and take a risk on themselves. And, sometimes it does make sense, sometimes it doesn't. But I think I just had to build up like intuition and, going through a lot of different deals. I think the best thing that people can do is have a very high volume approach when they first get started, because the more deal cycles that you can see and the more exposure that you get to the different types of variations of deals and kind of understanding the different curveballs that can come and being able to anticipate them better, that helps you to then build up your mental map of how processes should go, where you can tighten up things, where you can become more efficient, what skill sets you need to improve. Like if you can see where your deals are usually falling off, you can then focus on trying to like shore up that specific area so that you just become a better recruiter and more like an expert of your craft.
I have seen so many different styles of people just absolutely crush it in the recruiting game.
Yeah.
So the question I'm going to ask is not like the guarantee of this is how I'm gonna go. Like I've literally met somebody that I couldn't tell when his tone changed, but he billed like $3 million as a solo biller. So like, but like, have you like started noticing like certain predictive analytics or characteristics that really stuck out with the successful recruiters that you've been placing?
Yeah, it's tough because like you said, it's such a spectrum. And I think a lot of it depends on the industry too, because different industries have different personality types. Some markets, people are very analytical, kind of dry. So somebody who maybe isn't as charismatic or is a little bit more like, monotone or maybe very introverted can do just fine with those candidates, versus if you're trying to recruit salespeople, like you kind of have to be a salesperson to them in order to get them to buy in and engage. So I wouldn't necessarily say that because I've met some very introverted top producers who are, they're on when they're at work, but outside of that, they're like, leave me alone. I think the commercial like instincts and being able to guide those conversations is important. Also, work ethic is important. But beyond that, like you have to have a capability to recommit over and over and over again in this industry because it's tough. You're going to have to manage yourself more than you manage other people because it's like emotionally challenging. People can get it's really hard. Like, they'll lose deals. They get frustrated about things. They have to be able to pull themselves out of that like rut and be able to recommit over and over again. So that's, I think, the actual like common thread that I found is people who are capable of seeing themselves as a consultative professional and really like studying their craft, but B, like really focusing on quality and able to manage their emotions so that they can then be as effective as possible. If they're, super wheelie and dealy, then great. If they're like very introverted, but they're very focused and, they know exactly what they need to do deals, then some people can do 4 deals a year if they're at $250K each and be billing $1 million. So it's like everyone has different approaches to the business, but I think the ability to recommit and to be like a student of your craft is definitely one of the common threads that I've seen.
What do you think is a skill set that a lot of recruiters need to start spending more time developing?
That's a really good question. It's tough to give a blanket answer because every recruiter struggles with different things. So when I'm working with my candidates, I usually try to like figure out where their struggles are and kind of coach them on that individually. But no matter what, I think the capability to have tough conversations and to manage tough conversations and to be able to be blunt, honest, and consultative is probably the skill set that most people struggle with. It's hard. You have to tell clients when they're not doing what they need to do and be able to kind of call people out for stuff and make sure that they understand that they need to respect you and that your time is valuable as a recruiter. But a lot of that is like you have to start seeing yourself that way. So what a lot of people do is they're way too client centric. And obviously we work for our clients and they pay our bills, but we're also not their servants. And they need to understand like what our job is, what our scope of responsibility is, and they need to respect that. So personally, I have a lot of different kind of controversial viewpoints in this industry, but guarantee periods are something I have a very big problem with, like fundamentally. Because if I place somebody, they are working at my client every single day. I am not involved with them. I am not managing them. I am not resourcing them. I have no control over whether they're coming to work or not. Like, obviously, I can try to influence them, but I personally as a recruiter, believe that if at day 89 they decide to quit or they get fired, there's no reason why I should be out of 100% of my fee or have to be like on the hook to replace that candidate. That just, to me, that's completely unfair to a recruiter. My job is to get candidates, get them through the process, make sure that they're interviewing, that clients are able to ask all the questions, do their due diligence. But my client's job is to manage that person and to make sure that they're set up for success. If they're incapable of doing that, there's no reason why I should be on the hook for that. I think it's unfair. It really fundamentally doesn't make sense to me. It's something that's but I've been able to learn how to have that conversation with clients and say, okay, I need to, restructure our guarantee period, right? So we need to have some type of shared risk in this situation. My job is not to keep giving you candidates and you work with them for 89 days and then fire them so that you don't have to pay the fee. I'm not a contract recruiter, I'm a perm recruiter. So if there's some way that we can share and split the risk and that you can also help me help you. So if a candidate is having an issue once they're in place, I can hopefully coach them or we can do something to help them be successful. But treat me as a partner in this process, not as your servant or somebody that is going to take the fall for things that you can't do.
Okay, so you're having these you've learned how to have these difficult conversations. You think recruiters need to learn how to have these difficult conversations to really grow. But here's a question that I have for you, just out of curiosity. These are agencies that are having these conversations with their clients. Yeah. Is it harder to have these guarantee period conversations when I'm you just had that conversation with your client and you were now you're trying to push back on me? Come on, what the hell are you doing?
Well, I love a lot of things about this industry. I am its number one advocate. I'm also its biggest critic. And there's a lot of sleazy behavior in this industry, and there's a lot of sleazy behavior that agencies will do. So sometimes because their clients screw them over, they then feel like they have agency to screw me over as their vendor, and they don't feel bad about it. So throughout the 6.5 years that we've been working in this industry, we have really worked with all different types of agencies. There were plenty of agencies that we signed at the beginning of our firm, that they were just taking a shot on us that we would never partner with in a million years now. So we got comfortable with firing clients, figuring out what agencies are good, what agencies respect us as a partner in the process, and what agencies screw us over. So unfortunately, there are plenty of agencies that will have no qualms whatsoever about screwing over their rec directs. And that's part of the reason why we had to learn how to be smarter and to how to call this behavior out and how to manage it within clients, because unfortunately, they know all the tricks of the trade and all the dirty things that people can do to agencies. And some of them have no soul, I believe, and they're not very good people. So they have no issues whatsoever trying to do that to us. So we had to learn from our mistakes. And through that, that's part of the reason why we are pretty much the top rec to rec in the US, is because we know all of these firms, especially in New York City, my main market. I genuinely know pretty much every single agency, whether they've reached out to me to partner with them, I've poached from them, I used to work with them in the past. We've built out that mental map, and I have a lot of receipts for a lot of agencies that have screwed me over. And that's how I could then help guide my candidates when they're interviewing or talking about different firms. Some firms present as being a certain way, but I fundamentally believe if my client is going to screw me over, they will screw my candidate over. And that's somebody that I just don't want to partner with. So that's part of viewing yourself as a professional and someone who deserves respect. The longer that you're in the industry, the better of a reputation you have, the more capability you have of determining what clients you want to work with and what clients you don't want to work with. I do believe that as a recruiter, as soon as you let something slide, whether that's a client trying to renegotiate a rate at the 11th hour when they have an offer on the line and they feel like they have leverage, or, them trying to do some Weasley things to get out of paying the fee, or trying to negotiate on the side with the candidate and so they can lower how much they bill on and not tell you about it. There's a lot of different things that clients can do that are not great just because they don't respect us in the process. So as soon as you let that slide, especially because they usually pick to do it when they have leverage and you have a deal on the line, especially if you haven't closed a deal that month, you're stressed out about it. And there's that tendency to want to be so client-centric that you're okay, client, I'm going to just take what you have to say. As soon as they realize that you're that person that they can screw with, they will keep doing that. So it's up to us as an industry to stand up for ourselves, to be able to advocate for ourselves in the process, advocate not only for, our candidates, but also eventually for our clients too, because sometimes candidates can do sleazy things in the process too. So being able to like call things out and not take poor treatment and not accept that, that's what helps people to then, learn how to use their time more effectively, to make sure that they feel good about what they're doing. Because if you're getting screwed over by your clients all day long, it's not fun. Like nobody enjoys that. And most likely you're having a lot lower success, and you're probably working with crappy clients that you would not actually feel good about selling on the market just because you want to make sure that you don't make anyone mad. But I think the more that people like actually respect themselves as a recruiter and say like, I want to work with only the best clients, I want to work with only the best candidates, and how can I get myself to a level that I can then call the shots in these scenarios? That's what helps people to make the most money and be the most productive.
How does somebody get to that point?
You have to start viewing yourself that way.
Is it a mindset journey? Is it
It's a mindset journey. Yes, because there's a few different things. So like if people are actually focused on one market specifically, that helps for, the more generalized people are, the more difficult it is to be seen as a top headhunter in a space, right? So it's like if you don't have a specific niche, it's really hard to sell yourself as like, I am the recruiter for this specialty. But if you are a specialized recruiter, you understand your market very well, you have your network fully built out, like that's something that you can sell to clients in your market, right? Like I am only focused on this market. I am the market expert, blah, blah, blah. So as soon as you start focusing on one area, really learning that area and becoming like the go-to recruiter, that's when you're able to then start calling the shots. But you have to first see yourself as that. And a lot of that comes from, trial by fire. The more that you have kind of gone through different deal cycles, that that you are committed to this space, that you really want to focus on becoming the best recruiter that you can be, then clients will start seeing that in you. It's like they know that you're not going to stop until you get the job done and that you are the right person to go to for the job. But first you have to know, like, is this actually something that you want to do long term? One of the issues that we have in the industry is there's a low barrier to entry. So, people get into it straight out of college, kind of figure out, is this what I want to do for the rest of my career? One foot in, one foot out. Like, do I want to stay on the agency side, go internal? If anybody is like grappling with these questions about whether they're committed to this role or not, it's going to be tough for them to see themselves as a market expert and the person that's a go-to in the space, because they're kind of figuring out if they even want to keep doing this. So first, I think people need to figure out, is this a long-term career path for them? But if it is, that's when they can start working on viewing themselves as that like go-to professional, that person who is the market leader in that space. And a lot of that's like being curious about their market and being a student of the craft. So the people that are committed to listening to podcasts like yours, learning how to become the best recruiter that they can be, that's the mindset shift that then translates into, okay, I don't let my clients mess around with me. They understand that when they're partnering with me, they need to give me feedback. They need to be engaged in the process. It's unacceptable if they don't respond to my emails and, leave me hanging or, ghost me or something. Like that's all stuff that clients, if they respect you as a headhunter in your space, you are very valuable to them. Like they don't want to mess around with that relationship because they need you. So how do you get to a space where the clients want to work with you? Like they want to refer people to you. They don't want to mess up that relationship because they're like, this person gets me the people that I need. So there's no way I'm not going to give them feedback. There's no way that I'm going to undervalue them and renegotiate their fee at the 11th hour. Like I'm not going to do that because this is a valuable relationship for me. All of that's like, you have to work every single piece all together. But I think a lot of it starts with that mindset of like full commitment to being a student of the craft.
I love how you just absolutely just broke that down, but I want to kind of shift gears a little bit. Like, some industries, like 2022 was just like gangbuster for so many people. Yeah. And then walking into 2023 and 2024, like it wasn't the same for everybody. Like, we're in the sales industry. Sales is hard. People get burnt out. How do you start getting through those burnout periods?
It's tough. I mean, I don't think I've talked to a single person, honestly, who isn't at least a little bit burnt out. I think it's like a combination of a lot of different things. It's been a very tough past 4 years. COVID was hard, mentally very challenging, being locked down, not being able to have like a full social life and have those kind of like releases that people would have of like, being able to live a very full and varied life. Not only that, like you said, the market has been insane. So went from, being like a hyper inflated amazing market where like deals kind of felt like they were falling out of the sky, and most recruiters are like turning down business from their clients because they were so overworked, to then feeling like you're in the middle of the desert and there's no possible way that you can even get a client to give you a role. And not only that, like there was a lot of recession fear and like, storms, natural disasters. Not only that, COVID, like there's just a lot of things happening all at the same time. Civil unrest in a country, whatever. Like there's a lot going on. It's really mentally challenging to just be alive, I think, let alone to be a recruiter in the market and to be able to like adjust to them crazy swings. Cause it was like most people had their best year in 2022 that they've ever had. And most agencies were like 40% over what they did the year before. And just like, everyone's just like, wow, this is amazing. Like, that's when people started getting all the perks. Like agencies were just going left and right, doing whatever they could to try to, get people to join them, giving them sign-on bonuses, giving them way higher salaries. And like, not only that, most people's candidates were getting crazy packages, like to then go into like what felt like an awful market where it's like, I'm working 12 hours, I have nothing to show for it. And that was really hard and like for people to adjust to. And a lot of people were like, is this me? Is this the market? Like, I don't know what's going on. And they had like started getting a little bit depressed. So I was having a lot of these conversations with a lot of different recruiters. I think everyone's had some type of burnout. What I always tell people is like, you need to figure out, is it your firm that's like, screwing you over? Are they like tightening the screws on you? Are they micromanaging you to the level that's unrealistic and kind of driving you nuts or up a wall? Is it that you just can't handle the wild pendulum swings of the market and it's too stressful for you to be in a commission-oriented role where you're kind of at the mercy of the market to an extent? But, the whole like process of feeling like you have nothing to show for all the work that you're doing is something that you just can't mentally handle. In those cases, I always recommend that people just exit the industry. If it's like too mentally challenging and depressing and they just don't want to do this long-term, like, figure out what you want to do with your life. Best thing that you can do early in your career is try different things out. There's a lot of translatable skills in this industry that you could take into any other industry. So if it's really just that mentally taxing and challenging that it's not worth it, I don't think there's any shame in making that decision for yourself.
What if you don't want to exit the industry and like you just want to go to like a different place?
So that's where I recommend that people usually move agencies. So if they're just in an environment, like usually most people's first agency is going to be a large agency. Like typical career progression in this industry is starting out at a large agency that has a well-developed training and development program. I call them grad shops. Most people have that where it's like you're working, you have like crazy KPIs, your manager's breathing down your neck all the time. You're kind of like they're banging on you constantly. And you feel like you have no leash whatsoever. That's most people's first agency. And you learn the business, which is great. But after a couple of years, most people can't handle it anymore.
I'm just laughing because like I remember my days early on. I remember like some of the conversations we had. Like, if somebody like went internal, it's like, oh, look at them. They went internal. They're a failed agency recruiter. And then I went internal. I'm like, I was like top of the freaking charts and I made more money internally. I didn't even know that there was other agencies out there that had better comp structure, better training, and all sorts of stuff like that.
Find me up your comp structure at your first agency.
It was like $27K for the first 13 weeks, got up to like $32K. And I think like my gross margin was something like just shy of $650K, and I made like $62,000. And I'm like, I was
on a
dying.
$27K base.
I got up to 33.
Oh my God. That is rough. That is very
like looking back, I'm like, I understand why people quit.
I don't blame you. You're 100% going to make more money internal. I have this like belief system that if you're a top performer and you're not making 100,000 in an agency, I don't blame you for wanting to leave. Like that's not worth it. Like this is way too hard of a job to not make a good amount of money, at least a 6-figure amount of money if you're a top performer.
So, okay, like what should somebody be looking at for if they hit that point? Like, maybe I need to make a move.
Well, they usually end up working with me. I'm happy to help them make that move. That is my entire business, is helping people make that move. But so a couple different paths. For people that are full desk or sales oriented, those are the people that will have the most opportunities in the market, right? Because right now we're in a very like client centered market. There's a shortage of jobs and there's, not as many people that are focused just on recruiting. So if people don't have sales skills, and they're within the first year or two of their career, I highly recommend that people get on the sales side and become client facing as soon as possible if they want to stay in this career long term. If they don't end up going onto the client side, they're just going to be limited in their options because they're doing basically half of the job. So if there's an opportunity at their current firm for them to do that, that's always the best option. If there isn't an opportunity for them to do that, that's the first thing that I would be advising them to look at in another firm. So find a firm that will teach you the sales side if that's not an option that you have in your current firm. The more that you start to gain client relationships, the more that you are client facing, the more value that you're going to have in the industry internally and externally, because client relationships are what agencies value the most, right? The viewpoint of most agencies is they can, hire entry-level recruiters straight out of college, pay them like 30 grand, like you're getting paid, you were getting paid, and teach them how to recruit. The harder thing is teaching people how to sell on the client side. And those relationships just take time to develop. So if they're not on the sales side, A, figure out how they can, but B, then it's starting to figure out like, what environment can I see myself thriving in? Those are questions that people have to really ask for themselves. So what I try to pick apart when I'm working with a candidate that is considering leaving, considering staying, they're not really sure what to do, I always try to help them zoom out of their experience. So it's like, do they actually like the job? A, if they like what they're doing, they like, working with clients, they like working with candidates, they enjoy the doing deals stuff. It's just they're not in the right firm. Then I try to figure out with them, what are the things in their firm that they don't like? What would be best suited for them to be successful in their next environment, and then, help them find an agency that will provide that. Some cases, they need more structure. Like they are a person that they don't necessarily need micromanagement, but they need a bit more structure. So that's an agency where they're going to be the most successful working in a team. Most likely, they're going to need to be in the office at least a couple days a week. Like that helps them to be on top of what they're doing, keep them on track because, a lot of recruiters have ADHD. So for some people, they need a little bit more management just to make sure that they're focused on what they need to be doing. But other recruiters are like, I got this. I want my manager to never talk to me. So in those cases, especially if they're a full desk recruiter, I can place them in an agency where they may have never even meet their manager in person. They're just kind of running their own desk, doing their own deals. They check in once a week. Like that's great. Other recruiters are like, there's no way I could do that and be successful. I'm not good enough at managing myself. So it's like figuring out what their personality type is, what will set them up for success, and ultimately what they're going for. Are they the person who wants to work 80 hours a week and make $500,000? Okay, then they need to go in a firm that's going to A, give them the best quality markets and also take off as many parameters and restrictions from their market as possible so that they aren't just focused in one tiny area, is going to max out their business. That's like a lot. It's a very big decision-making tree that I work with candidates. But generally speaking, you have to have some level of self-awareness about what isn't working. And a lot of times it does take me working with them to figure out what that is. Because a lot of times what people think is the issue may not actually be the issue. That's just their main frustration point. But it's actually a symptom of something that's a little bit deeper that we then try to work on together to figure out what that is.
Love that. Good breakdown. That's something I probably should have shut down and did when I was looking at saying goodbye.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, just everyone talks about it. It's when you're talking to your clients and candidates, you can see the 1,000-foot view. When you're looking at your own career, it's a lot harder. Even if you're a recruiter.
I remember my breaking point was when they took I never wanted to do the sales side of the house, which was a mistake that looking back on, I wish I could go back and do. But I found a new client, I opened it up, got the deal signed, turned into a whale of a client, and then they completely carved that state away from me and gave it to another manager. And then at the end of the year, they're like, you missed the President's Club by $2,000 and it's all your fault. You should have worked harder. I was like, you guys just took my business.
To me, that is that's the stuff about agencies that drives me nuts. If somebody is bringing in that business for you, protect that market share for them. That's so unfair to do that to people.
Literally, I got told this is politics. It's how it goes. And I'm like, but that was my pocketbook.
And $2,000 is that's even if they just threw you a bone, the amount of loyalty that they would get from you is you probably would have stayed for years after that. It's that's the thing about agencies that drives me nuts. It's they will cut off their nose to spite their face. It doesn't make sense.
Well, anyways, before we jump over to the quick fire questions, is there anything else that you want to cover or share about how to become a successful recruiter within the agency world?
I feel like I've talked a lot about so many different topics, but The best advice that I can give anyone, and I feel like I'm beating a dead horse here, but like view yourself as somebody who adds value. You're not just a recruiter. If you're a really good headhunter, you're so much more than that. You're literally a consultant basically for your clients and candidates. Like you are somebody who can actually make markets. Like you can make some moves. You can move teams. You can like do mergers and acquisitions. Like there's so many different things that we can do with this skill set that we're not just resume factories. So if you're working with clients or you kind of are a resume factory because you haven't really like valued yourself as that professional, the best thing you can do is start taking this really, really seriously, because the more that you do that, like that will translate to your clients and candidates. Like they can feel the seriousness of how much of a student of your craft you are in your conversations. You can work at higher rates. You can work with the top people. And that just makes the job so much more fun than kind of like feeling like you're just getting to run around and being yanked around by a ton of different people. Because that's all, that's normal in the industry.
I love that. And that kind of goes into like the first quick fire question. Like you gave it like an overall thing. I think that takes out my second question. But like if somebody's literally just getting started in recruiting, like they're listening to this podcast interview, they're in their first week or first month, what advice would you tell them to really set yourself up for a successful career?
I mean, I think know that it's going to take a while to be successful. You're not going to probably jump out of the gates and be like top this and that. Like you have to be willing to eat a lot of shit in the industry. So the more that you put yourself out there and just like deal with it over and over and over again, you have to deal with the rejection. You have to like listen to your manager when they're telling you to do something. You don't necessarily know what you're doing, and you can't necessarily choose how to do things better if you don't know what you're doing on a baseline. So that's something I talk to like ambitious young recruiters. They're like, my manager doesn't know what they're talking about. And I'm like, well, have you been doing any deals? No, I haven't been doing any deals. I'm like, all right, first of all, just like execute the playbook. The playbook is very simple. Once you like have enough reps and you have success under your belt, that's when you can start changing things up. You can start calling the shots, blah, blah, blah. But the sooner that you can get out there and just like almost like robotically over and over and over and over and over again, get the reps in, that's the best thing that you can do for yourself, because you start building up that mental map of how deals go, how different things can, flow in the industry, how you can tighten up your process. And those are all things like you have to first put in the reps and put in the work. Once you do that, then you can start kind of refining your process and usually working a lot less hard, but working a lot smarter.
Has there been a book that has had I understand a podcast has literally changed your life, but has there been a book that's had a huge impact on your career also?
I would say for recruitment specifically, Donna actually wrote a book on agency recruitment, and I edited the book for her. So that didn't obviously exist when I first started out, but I would highly, highly recommend that people order Don's book. But beyond that, I really like the book Top Biller by Steve Guest. There are very few books that are geared specifically to agency recruiting, right? A lot of books are about HR, they're about sales. It's not specifically like this industry. So there are very few books that are catered to us because we're kind of, a little bit of an undercover industry that most people don't know about. So Top Biller by Steve Guest is amazing. And then Don's book, Agency Recruitment 101, are two books that I would definitely recommend.
Do you have like a favorite like tech tool or rec tech tool that you absolutely love?
I'm a really bad person to ask about this because I feel like I'm a boomer sometimes. Like the older I get, I think I do things a lot more manually than I really need to. But I mean, obviously LinkedIn is my baby. Building up my following on LinkedIn, that's another thing too, that I guess if we're going to advise for recruiters, like if you can start building your presence on LinkedIn, that's something that has fed me, really started focusing on content. And I think that's been a really big game changer for my book of business. At this point, I'm getting pretty much all my business inbound, which is an amazing place to be. And I'm very grateful for that. But that came from, building up my presence on LinkedIn, like content within their industry and become market leaders. And honestly, even if you're not that good of a recruiter, if you market yourself as such, people will believe you. So that's an easy hack. If you start putting yourself out there online, I think that also really helps.
I think this wild thing is LinkedIn articles. I have an article from literally the beginning of COVID that still brings in leads.
Wow. That's amazing.
But it's like what you just said is put something out there and people start seeing you as a industry leader. And yeah.
I've even seen people can be so creative with it, but you have to be brave to be able to put yourself out there. It's like you have to be open to kind of the potentially like people looking a little bit stupid or people kind of making fun of you, like, oh, you think you're so good, like you're just putting content out there like that. You have to be willing to deal with all of that. But
Wait, real quick. Did those people pay your bills?
huh?
Did those people pay your bills?
Oh, of course they do, because I need all of their attention and affirmation. I'm kidding. No, but that's something I think that, a lot of people do struggle with, like the fear of being judged. But if you can get over that, you understand everyone else is dealing with that too, then you're obviously going to have a lot of results to show for it.
So, like, looking back on your recruiting career, like, you didn't quit. It sucked your first year. You grounded out. You worked another job to pay bills, like all sorts of stuff. You hustled, lived with your family, but you didn't quit.
Mm-hmm.
And you've started putting all these pieces together over the course of your recruiting career. Is there something that you can like look back in yourself and kind of contribute to like why you've been seeing this kind of success that you've been seeing?
I think the thing that was really like pivotal for me is I had full 100% commitment. I was never 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And I think that you need to have that to be successful in this industry. Like, you can't come in looking for, okay, how can I get shortcuts? And like, how can I not work hard? I was 100% committed, mainly because I had just come off the worst failure of my life, right? So I was in a place where like, it was embarrassing. Like, I lived my worst case scenario. Everyone thought I was crazy moving to Panama. They said it was a really bad idea and that things were going to blow up in my face. And I was like, oh no, that's not going to happen. And then it did happen. But from living that failure, I then had like nothing to lose. And I wasn't afraid. It helped me lose a lot of like fear of being judged, which I think you need to be successful in this industry. Like, you are going to look stupid. You are going to put your foot in your mouth as you're learning. Like, you figure things out, you make mistakes, and you have to be able to bounce back from them. What I found is like the quicker that I can bounce back from something, the more successful I'm going to be, because it's inevitable that I'm going to mess things up. Things can slip through the cracks. Like, I can't let that make me view myself as being bad at what I do. Like, just because I made a mistake doesn't mean I'm a bad recruiter. What do? I own it, figure out what went wrong, be honest with myself, take accountability, clean up a mess if I need to, and get back on the horse. That's the process that I started to refine, is like, yes, okay, things didn't go my way. That's not great. It sucks. And I'm going to let myself feel that for a minute. But okay, I need to get out there and I need a quick win. So I have a whole process when something doesn't go my way, and I'm bummed about it, because inevitably, like, you're going to deal with that in this industry. Like, something didn't work out that looked like, oh, I thought it was going to be a deal, or like, man, I haven't closed a deal in a month. And like, the one deal that I had in my pipeline is not looking good. And like, it just fell apart and blew up in my face, and it sucks. And it's Friday and I'm going to the weekend depressed because I don't know when my next commission check is coming in. My manager's mad at me. Like, those are all things that people deal with over and over and over again. So like, learning how to be able to be fully committed, it helps you then, okay, bounce back. Like, okay, I'm not questioning about whether this is right for me or not. I know it's right for me. Things didn't work out my way. So what am I going to do? I'm going to figure out what went wrong, feel the feels for a minute, but also not let myself wallow in it. And then I want to go for a quick win, and I need a win. So what am I going to do? I'm going to start sourcing. If I get a call on the calendar, that's going to make me feel great. Like, I just need something that makes me feel good. And that's kind of the process that I've come up with. Like, I have a whole process about how I handle myself mentally when I lose a deal. But that starts from like taking full accountability, right? I have to look at myself in the mirror. Did I do everything I could do? Was I thorough? Did I, shirk any responsibility? Did I let something slip through the cracks? Was I not on top of things? Okay, if that happened, then I can't be mad about losing that deal. In reality, I didn't do everything I should have done. So what am I going to do next time? I want to make sure I do everything I should do. And I'm going to apologize to people if I let something, if I didn't show up as I needed to as a professional. But then like, I need to figure out what that is and then learn that I can fix it and get back on the horse. And I think I was forced to do that over and over and over again because my first year sucked so bad. So I had a lot of chances to self-reflect and take accountability for things not going my way. But all of that helped because I was fully committed to this industry and to like building myself as a recruiter. I wasn't like, okay, I lose the deal, I can't handle it, I'm going to leave. Like, I was like, okay, I need to get better at this. I need to crack this code. How can I do that? And I think a full commitment is honestly what I would tell anyone to do. Like, I would just make it your entire life, honestly. If you can do that for your first 3 to 6 months, like eat, sleep, breathe, dream recruiting, you're going to be a lot better for it in your first year.
Looking back on your career in the recruiting space, and like we've done a good job kind of like walking through the puzzle pieces of your first year and a combination of what you've seen from other people. and like really what just like zeroes in on how to be successful in this space. But let's look past that first year where you figured it out with everything that you know now, with the partnership, co-founder or co-owner of the company, crushing it with the content, inbound leads, all this stuff. So fast forward past the first year, you're in your second year in this game. If you had the chance with everything that you know now to go back and have a conversation with yourself, what advice would you give yourself?
I would have given myself a few different pieces of advice. I was still at that point a little too focused on being nice. I wanted to be liked, and I wasn't putting myself out there content-wise as much as I should have. I didn't really start doing content until going into my third year. And part of it was like, I didn't want to step on toes. I was too concerned about being, universally liked versus being effective. So that's the advice that I would have given myself earlier, is just like, get out there. Like, just who cares what people think about you? The sooner that you start, the more effective you're going to be. That would be the advice, I think, for anyone going into their second year, honestly, is like, if you aren't doing content by the end of your first year, start doing content. Like, that would be the best advice that I can give across the board, because that's going to be the difference. Like, enough after your first year that you can feel comfortable creating content. Like, what you're talking about. In your first year, it's a little harder because you might still be learning the ropes. But in your second year, if you aren't already doing content, you need to start.
I think I didn't start doing content until like my 15th year.
I mean, honestly, like, there aren't that many people doing it. It's great. It's like a wide open landscape. It's a really easy way to differentiate yourself. Because once you start shouting about what you're doing, then people will start thinking about you more. And all of that is like going to give you more business. It's like very, very simple.
For anybody that's been listening to this, if they want to follow you, which I'm sure you're going to share the exact place where I'm thinking, but how can they go about following you?
LinkedIn is the place to be. LinkedIn is really the only social media platform that I focus on. I'm not an influencer like on Instagram or anything like that. Everything else that I have is just my personal stuff. But for like the actual following, is everything that I do is on LinkedIn.
Awesome. And before I let you go, is there anything else that you want to share with the listeners?
No, I just am really grateful for the opportunity to be here. I'm always happy to talk shop with people. So if you are a recruiter who is thinking about your career, especially if you are full desk, if you're sales focused, I only represent people in this industry. So if you're considering working with a rec to rec, I would love to be the person that you consider working with.
Awesome. Well, Grace, I just want to say thank you for like really just breaking out the puzzle pieces and putting them together and how to win in the agency space, but also like how to build respect for yourself as a recruiting professional. Because man, this conversation really took me back to my early days where I was nice. And being nice, like, fucked up the first like 6-7 months of my recruiting career. Like, it sucked. I had to learn how to be good.
Yeah.
And being good is when I started to respect myself. So literally this conversation took me back to those early days where you can learn how to become the professional, the respected professional out there. So Grace, I just want to say thank you. And for the listeners, we're coming in at the end of the year. Spend time with your family. When you're there, spend that time with them. But when you're not there, and you're back on your recruiting desk, everything that you're doing now is going to set you up for 2025. And I believe 2025 is going to be the year of personal abundance for yourself. So let's go crush it.
I have one final thought. I apologize. That reminded me about the being nice versus being effective. I have firmly believed that being nice is actually being clear. Like, if you can't help somebody, let them know. If you're not the right person for the job, or, unfortunately, you just don't have the bandwidth to take on this project and be able to deliver on it in a way that's going to make everyone happy, the more that you're honest about that, that is actually being nice. It's not just telling people what they want to hear and, kind of backing yourself into a corner and being yanked in every direction. It's being clear about, this is where I'm good, this is where I'm not, and this is where I can help you in managing expectations so that people aren't, wondering what's going on. So that, I think clear is kind is like one of my favorite sayings, but I think that's different than how most people view it, is like that you feel like you kind of have to just be like a yes man. That's not actually being nice, in my opinion.
That right there is the perfect way to end this conversation. So Grace, thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. This is fun.
All right, let's go crush it, guys.